Unicef to present these to us. We're then also going to take into the African region the question of how do we accelerate progress, what more can be done, and we're going to be hearing from a range of stakeholders who are going to be leaning into this very invitation and question. For you that have logged on and are engaging in this conversation, allow me to extend a further invitation to you. Our hashtag in social media spaces today is #EndChildLabor2021. #EndChildLabor 2021. Let's let the world know what we're talking about, and let's let the world know that we've paused to really mark the World Day Against Child Labor in Africa. As always, you can follow me at The Real Nosy as we keep this conversation going. Finally, if you'd like to follow these proceedings and engage in this conversation in French, the interpretation button is at the bottom of your screen. And so we are trying to make this conversation as inclusive as possible. Now, to kick us off with the opening session, I'm going to open our opening section by inviting our high-level speakers to lean forward as they share their opening remarks. It's my pleasure at this moment to introduce Advocate Against Child Labor in Tanzania, Madam Brenda Kisaka, Advocate Brenda Kisaka, to kindly please take to the floor. Advocate, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner, dear esteemed organizer, ILO, Unicef, Africa Union, REC, and member state, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, depending on the area where you are. My name is Brenda Kisaka. I'm 24 years old, and I'm an advocate against child labor here in Tanzania. I'm working with other young girls to coordinate activities aimed at ensuring that children are not engaged with child labor. We make sure to report the cases that happen regardless of these to the government for further action. My work entails to ensure children engaged with child labor return to schools and others young people receive vocational training and support for self-development. For instance, this year I was able to help a young girl who was 16 years old, who was a child labor survivor, to get enrolled in vocational training by providing her some funds to pay some fees. So right now she is a champion in amplifying voices of vulnerable children and young people to end child labor here in Tanzania. However, much work needs to be done, and this day of child labor, it reminds us and serves as a catalyst in growing worldwide movement against child labor and provide an opportunity to gain support from government, international agencies like UN, civil societies, youth, women groups, as well as media for campaign against child labor. This is to say we need immediate and effective measure for all stakeholders to eradicate forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking, and to ensure prohibition and elimination of all forms of child labor, including recruitment of youth of such child soldiers. I will continue with this effort in Tanzania, and I encourage you to join me in whenever you are. Together, we can end child labor in Africa and the global at large. Let's act now. Let's end child labor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Kisaka. Let's act now. Let's end child labor. Thank you very much for that call to action. It's clear, and it is a clarion call that will certainly run through the conversation today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Edward Adai, UNICEF representative to the African Union and Economic Commission to Africa, as he takes to the floor to share his thoughts with us. Dr. Adai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nozipo. Your Excellency, Commissioner Omira Fadel, good to see you. Ms. Cynthia Samuel Olujon, ILO Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa. Distinguished representatives of the RECs and member states, ILO, the EU Commission, etc. Partners, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Addis Ababa and all protocols observed. Allow me to start by thanking Ms. Brenda Kisaka for her remarks and for her call to action. Let's act now. And to thank her for the work she's doing, and indeed for challenging us to eliminate child labor. Today's event is being celebrated to commemorate the 2021 World Day Against Child Labor. It is being held against the backdrop of our promise to eradicate child labor by 2030. It is also another opportunity for us to take stock of where we are and to agree priority actions for moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the estimates on child labor that you'll be listening to in the next session, Africa is moving in the wrong direction. The number of children engaged in child labor in Africa has increased from 72 million in 2016 to 92 million in 2020, as Nozipo said at the beginning. And worse still, and indeed a tragedy, is that those engaged in hazardous work has increased from 31 million to 41 million. And thank you, Nozipo, for putting these figures in context. It's a tragedy. We are moving in the wrong direction as a continent. Indeed, the number of children in child labor in Africa is more than that of the rest of the whole world put together. For these 92 million children, we are breaking our promise to end child labor. These children are deprived of their childhood and their dignity. They are involved in work that is harmful to their physical and mental development. They are denied opportunity for schooling and for learning. They are denied the opportunity to achieve their developmental milestones, to achieve their full potential and a hope for a better future. In fact, Nozipo, most of these children are sentenced to a life of intergenerational poverty and deprivation. They will not be able to make meaningful contributions to the continent's development agenda. It indeed reflects what we are all trying to do: create an Africa fit for children. Poverty, weak regulations, conflicts, barriers to education, some cultural practices, gender norms, market demand for cheap labor, and the recent COVID-19 pandemic are some of the drivers of the trend in Africa and are pushing several of our children into child labor. Ladies and gentlemen, we know what needs to be done to prevent and respond to child labor. We know we need strong regulations in their enforcement. We know we need social protection and livelihood programs to make it easier for poor families to look after their children. We know we need to create a safe environment for our children. And we know we need to provide basic education, vocational training, and psychosocial support to victims of child labor. So I guess the question on my mind and on your minds is, as we commemorate this day, what do we need to do to reverse the trend in Africa? And that's the subject of today's discussions. But I'd like to offer some thoughts throughout the discussion. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'd like to celebrate the African Union 10-year action plan on eradication of child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery in Africa. I celebrate it because it provides us with a North Pole and the essential signposts for guiding us and propelling us forward in our march to reverse this trend. It is with this in mind that I'd like to offer 4 thoughts for accelerating actions to reverse the trend in child labor in Africa. The first is we need to reaffirm our vision and commitment to end child labor in Africa by 2030. As it said, where there is no vision, the people perish. We need to invest in building a shared vision and commitment at the highest level of the African Union and countries. 2, we need to work collectively, and the focus is on collectively, to translate commitments to end child labor into 1, increased investments in the social sectors, stronger child-friendly institutions in our countries, and a stronger focus on implementation and accountability to our children and to the commitments we are making. 3, we need to focus and scale up innovations and game changers, including stronger regulations, livelihood and social protection interventions and education. The only way we can break the cycle of poverty in Africa is education, and education of our children. And lastly, we need to create a social movement and an ecosystem of actors. Luzipo, we need you to help us push this agenda. An ecosystem of actors, including communities and industry, working in concert and with a sense of purpose to end child labor at all levels. Actors in this ecosystem must act with urgency and accountability. I'd like to end with a request to you, Your Excellency, Amira. I'd like to request that you set up a multi-stakeholder group to review the global estimates in the light of the continental roadmap, to look at what we need to do to revert this trend, building on the recommendations of this meeting. Let me conclude with an African proverb. The laughter of a child lights up a home. The 92 million children in child labor in Africa are not laughing. Let us work together to bring hope, joy, and laughter to these children, because together we can reverse this trend. I thank you for your attention and reiterate UNICEF's commitment to the work, to work with all of you to bring hope to the 92 million children in child labor. It is about hope, dignity, and agency of these children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adai. I think at the end of those opening remarks, we all have an additional piece of work that we have to go out and do. I think Her Excellency has the multi-stakeholder group. I've got my work cut out for me to have more conversations around child labor. And I'm sure the regional director is probably going to get something in her in tray as well on the back of that. Thank you very much. We are moving in the wrong direction. We have some broken promises, but we do know what to do. And now it's time for us to get to work and really change the reality of Africa's children and make sure that there is laughter in every African home. Madam, I move on now, ladies and gentlemen, to the ILO Assistant Director General and the Regional Director for Africa, Madam Cynthia Samuel Olujuwon. Madam, the floor is yours as you share with us your opening remarks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Luzipo, our Program Director. Let me start by thanking Her Excellency, my sister, Madam Amira El-Fadil, the Commissioner for Social Affairs, for the excellent collaboration that we've had and that has led to even this event that we're having today to celebrate the Day of the African, against child labor in Africa. I also express my greetings to the UNICEF rep, to also the advocates against child labor from Tanzania, to all the participants here and all our development partners. I quote a very, very telling statement. The scars of child labor never go away. End of quote. These are not my words. These are the words of Molly, a brilliant young activist from Uganda who worked in tea plantations as a child. Another quote, it breaks my heart to know that more than 160 million children go through the same thing, she says with very strong emotions. Beyond my professional responsibility, my first words today are those of an African woman, a mother, a grandmother, who is disheartened by the fact that 92 million African children are in child labor. And these numbers are likely to increase due to the COVID pandemic. Who is disheartened by the fact that almost half of those children are in hazardous work that puts their safety, their health, and sometimes their lives at risk. Disheartened by the fact that almost a third of them don't go to school, thereby perpetuating poverty, recycling poverty over generations. This is definitely not the Africa we want. This is not acceptable. This is not justifiable. There is no excuse whatsoever for this situation. What it means is that we, as parents,
yeah, no, she's not.
Apologies, RD. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could kindly ask for all of us to mute our microphone. Technical team, if you're able to mute the speaker, please, so that the RD can continue. Apologies, madam, please continue.
Okay. Again, this is not the Africa we want. This is not acceptable. It's not justifiable. It's inexcusable. It means that we, as parents, as citizens, as policymakers, as development activists, are failing. And we're failing in our responsibility to our children. Of course, the challenge is considerable, not only because of the magnitude of the problem, but also because of its complexity. Child labor is driven by poverty, education exclusion, informality, inequalities, conflicts, and other kinds of exclusion. Yet there's more that can be done. First of all, we must prevent further regression amid the COVID-19 crisis through income support to families in situations of vulnerability, and measures should be in place to bring children back to school. We should also not lose track of broader policy measures to end child labor. Evidence has shown that increased social protection, access to free quality education, healthcare, access to decent jobs, access to basic services, all create an enabling environment that reduces the vulnerability of households to child labor. I believe that Africa is on the right path based on some of the developments in the last couple of months. The continent has shown strong political will to put in place policies aimed at extending social protection, policies aimed at generating employment, particularly for young people, aimed at facilitating transition from informality. Trade unions and employers' organizations support these efforts. I take this opportunity to acknowledge the Global Changemaker Award won by the Federation of Kenyan Employers 2 days ago for their Adopt a Child initiative, an important initiative that contributes to child labor. The ILO, as required by the 2019 Abidjan Declaration, supports these efforts. Ending social protection, for instance, is a key priority for the ILO in Africa, and our objective is to reach 40% coverage by 2025. I, in my capacity as the Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa, I commit the office to work even more to ensure that ILO mainstreams child labor issues in all its programs, in all its interventions, particularly within the Abidjan Declaration Implementation Plan. For measures to be effective, we must all coordinate our efforts within the UN family, with development banks, with bilateral and multilateral donors, the private sector, and those even in the media. We need to strengthen partnerships. We need to scale up our work. And Alliance 8.7 provides a very good framework. And I commend the 11 countries in Africa that are Pathfinder countries. Together, we will address the issue of financing to address child labor, including domestic public financing, ODA, debt relief, public-private partnership, and other innovative financing arrangements. The global increase in child labor since 2016 has been driven by Africa, unfortunately. The face of child labor in the world is the face of an African child. Global child labor goals will not be achieved. I repeat, global child labor goals will not be achieved without a major breakthrough in Africa. It is in this regard that I call upon the international community to focus urgently on Africa. And it can't just be in words, it has to be in deed. As I close, the process leading to the 5th Global Conference on Child Labor, to be held in South Africa in 2022, will give African stakeholders the opportunity to align and redouble efforts to reach target 8.7 by 2025. In support of the implementation of the 10-year Continental Action Plan to eliminate child labor, ILO is committed to working closely with the African Union and other partners in the next few months to analyze further the 2020 global estimates on child labor. This will help us deepen our common understanding of the drivers of child labor in Africa and fine-tune the continental strategies to accelerate progress. This week, we also commemorate the Day of the African Child. Through the adoption of the AU Agenda 2040 for an Africa Fit for Children, we have promised the children of Africa a future without child labor. We must keep our promise. We must not fail them. We must not fail Africa. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That is, of course, ILO Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa, Madame Cynthia Samuel Olojuwon, reminding us that we have a promise that needs to be kept, and not keeping that promise would not only be failing African children, but indeed it would be failing the continent. The scars of child labor live forever. We can change that experience for 92 million children on the continent. Thank you very much, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this moment now to open the floor to Her Excellency Amira El-Fadil, African Union Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, moderator. Greetings. I would like to start by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and good afternoon. I would like to start by welcoming all those who joined us today for this important event, representatives of member states, representatives of regional economic communities, and advocates, development partners, the media, individuals committed to ending child labor in Africa. And I would like to give a special thank you to my sister, Cynthia, the Regional Director for ILO, and also for Dr. Adi, Unicef representative also to the AU and to UNECA. Today's event takes place only 2 days after we celebrated the commemoration of the Day of the African Child, which took place on the 16th of June. myself, I traveled to Lesotho, to Maseru. We celebrated with the government of Maseru, and also at the same time, we did the inauguration of the relocation of our secretariat. The secretariat for ASRIWAC has been relocated from Addis Ababa to Maseru. It was an opening for this new building for the secretariat, and now the secretariat will be functioning from Maseru, from Lesotho. This year's theme of it's of particular relevance to today's discussion. 30 years after the adoption of the Charter, the theme was about the acceleration of the implementation of Agenda 2040 for an Africa fit for children. And here I'm talking about the theme of the Day of the African Child, not the general theme of the African Union. This is today's event for me. It's an opportunity to remind ourselves that more than 30 years ago, the Organization of the African Unity adopted the African Charter for the Rights and Welfare of the Child. It states that children should be protected from all forms of economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with their physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development. And this is Article 15 of the Charter. Today, also, it is an opportunity for us to remind ourselves that 5 years ago, the AU Executive Council of Ministers adopted the Agenda 2040, fostering an Africa fit for children. The Agenda 2040 is guided by the aspiration that every child benefits fully from quality education, and that every child is protected against violence, exploitation, neglect, and abuse. And let me stop here and to say that education, I would like to agree with Dr. Adi that education is the cornerstone. If we want a better future for this continent, it is education. If we want a better future for our children, it's through education. If we want economic prosperity, it's through education. So education is very important, and we all of us now talking and attending this event, we know that education is heavily and negatively impacted by this COVID-19. We know the lockdowns of the schools. We know that schooling from home, digital schooling is not accessible to every child in Africa, especially in the rural places where you don't only have no internet accessibility, sometimes you don't have electricity. So I think the school dropouts will increase. We don't have yet the statistics, but with the challenges we have with COVID-19, I believe more children will be school dropouts, especially girls. So this impact of COVID-19 is really bad on our children in Africa, especially on the education sector. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, last year also African Union member states adopted the African Union 10-year action plan for the elimination of child labor, forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking 2020-2030. It provides an immediate framework for mobilizing African Union institutions, member states, regional economic communities, and other partners on the continent to scale up efforts and accelerate progress towards the achievement of the AU Agenda 2063 and the target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And also let me stop here to thank Dr. Adi and to tell him that his proposal is really timely. I will make sure that my department will lead on this proposal on having a multi-stakeholder group to look for the what we want, the way forward, and to look also at the implementation of this strategic plan that we already launched. We need to join our efforts. It is member states, it's African Union, it is all of the partners, ILO, Unicef, and other stakeholders, and the civil society organizations, all of us. We will have this platform, definitely, Adi, and I accept your proposal. It's really very good and timely. The action plan focuses on a critical set of interventions that can bring rapid results. It recognizes that it is our collective responsibility to end child labor and specifies primary implementation responsibilities between country level, regional, and continental levels. I would like also you to allow me to stop here and to thank ILO, especially the Africa office, because they supported the African Union throughout the whole process of developing the action plan. And also ILO and us, we celebrated this International Year of the Elimination of Child Labor, and we are working very closely together, the two of us with Unicef, and we will continue working together because a lot needs to be done. We have not yet finished our task in eliminating child labor. The African countries also share a vision of continent without child labor. African countries share a strong commitment to end child labor, as demonstrated by the high level of ratification of human rights instruments and the adoption of laws or policies and the regulation to end child labor. But yet, we are not making enough or rapid progress. And here, I would like to agree with Madam Cynthia. There are 20 more million African children in child labor than 4 years ago. So the number of children in child labor is increasing in Africa. 1 in 5 children in Africa are in child labor. Millions more are at risk of being pushed into child labor as a result of this COVID-19, unless urgent mitigation measures are taken by our member states. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge is not a small one. Child labor is deeply rooted in poverty and socioeconomic vulnerabilities, lack of decent work opportunities, inadequacy of social safety nets, informality, poor access to social services, education, as well as social norms. As a result of this 2021 global report, AU member states will need to enhance their social protection policies in line with the Agenda 2063 and the draft protocol on social protection and social security, but also with the social agenda, which is a very important document. We need to look into it and we need to be serious about implementing it. This event today also gives us opportunity to reflect on the situation and to discuss strategies to end child labor through measures aimed at improving access to quality education, social protection, and decent work, while building child protection systems, improving birth registration, and addressing gender norms and discrimination. With 4 child laborers out of 5 working in agriculture, we will pay particular attention to strategies aimed at promoting adequate rural livelihood and resilience. And in this, we need to work very closely with the department responsible about agriculture and rural development within the African Union. In line also with the celebration of the AU Year of Arts, Culture and Heritage, it is also important to reflect on the need to include arts education in the school curriculum to make sure that children take up this career path in the arts, culture and heritage sector at early age. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by saying that during this International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, we have a big opportunity to scale up the work and the investments towards the achievement of our Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2040 for children and the SDG, especially Target 8.7. In the lead up to the 5th Global Conference in South Africa in 2022, let us press forward with greater coordination, with bigger commitments and action to protect every child in Africa and to eliminate child labor in Africa. Thank you very much for listening and shukran jazeelan. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for a really compelling opening remark. And of course, a reminder from all of us that our promises will be tested and the extent to which we're able to keep them by 2030, by 2040, by 2063. So all of these milestones are opportunities for us to show up with evidence that shows that we have kept our promise for African children. Ladies and gentlemen, I made a promise to you when we started that following on from our opening session, we're going to go straight into the 2020 global estimates, lift up what those estimates are telling us, but also what the policy recommendations are. At this point, I'm going to allow Madame Michaela de Kock, who is standing by from the Research and Evaluation Unit looking at fundamentals at the ILO, as well as Madame Claudia Kappa, who is a statistics specialist in the data and analytics section at UNICEF, to take to the floor as they talk us through the 2020 global estimates and the policy recommendations. Michaela, Claudia, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nozifo. Honorable participants, it's a pleasure to have the chance to share with you the result of the Global Estimates 2020. This presentation will be done in collaboration with my colleague, Claudia Kappa from UNICEF, and this is the result of more than 1 year very close collaboration between UNICEF and ILO. I will say first a few words about the data sources and the methodology underlying the results. This global estimate is the 6th one produced by the ILO since 2000, but this is the first one done in collaboration with UNICEF, and this is really worth mentioning. The data sources underlying the 160 million global estimate come from 106 national household surveys covering more than 2/3 of the world population of the target group, children 5 to 17. If we focus on Africa, we had 32 statistically representative household surveys coming from all the parts of Africa. All the details are in the technical report. The coverage for Africa is also about 2/3, which allow a good extrapolation for the full continent. The selection of data sets on the basis of which the figures were extrapolated was done jointly by ILO and UNICEF based on solid criteria. We need to have access to the microdata and to take the most recent data points. The coverage was for the last 4 years, 5 on some exceptional cases. We also took into account the fact that the data sources had to be the ones selected by countries for SDG reporting as much as possible to ensure consistencies. I will stop here for methodology. We are available for further dialogue with all of you later in the year and in the coming weeks. I now give the floor to my colleague, Claudia, who will present the main results.
Thank you so much, Michael. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to present the results of this joint report with ILO. First of all, let me give you some basic numbers. Today in the world, there are 160 million children who are engaged in child labor, and 79 million of them are performing hazardous work that has direct harmful impact on their education, health, and moral development. Now, let's go into an overview of the trends, because as Michael mentioned, this type of analysis builds on a wealth of data that has been compiled and analyzed over a long period of time. And we have trend data available since the year 2000. So we are therefore able to report on changes in child labor over 20 years. And as this graph shows, the number and percentage of children in child labor has been gradually declining since 2000 until 2016. But over the last 4 years, we witnessed a stagnation in the prevalence of child labor, which has remained at 9.6%. At the same time, the number of children in child labor has increased by over 8 million, mostly as a result of the demographic increase in the population of children in this age group. And as you can see, similar patterns can be seen with respect to hazardous work, for which there has been a decline again, constant decline between 2000 and 2016, and then a stagnation accompanied by an increase in the overall number. So what is the impact of COVID? Because the number that we produce are the results of data that have been collected prior to the 19 COVID crisis. And we know that the COVID-19 crisis has triggered a lot of risk factors that are known to be associated with child labor. First of all, an increase in poverty. And this graph shows you the number of children in child labor between 2012 and 2020, and the projected number taking into consideration the possible impact of COVID. First of all, we estimated that an additional 8.9 million children are likely to fall into child labor due to the poverty that has been triggered by the pandemic. So by 2022, we can have possibly an additional 8.9 million just because of poverty. At the same time, through statistical modeling, we have estimated the possible additional impact due to changes in social protection coverage. If we allow austerity measures and other factors to cause a slippage in social protection coverage, we might have an additional 46.2 million children in child labor by 2022. On the other end, if we increase social protection coverage to the same extent, the number of children in child labor can actually decrease from 160 million down to 144.9, which means that if we allow social protection coverage to increase, we are going to be able to not only offset the possible increase in child labor due to the pandemic, but also reduce the overall number. So there is great potential for us as an international community and for countries to be able to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on child labor. So let me now give you a little bit of a more closer overview of the situation with a specific focus on Africa. So of the 160 million children in child labor in the world, 92.2 are in Africa, which correspond, as it was eloquently said before me, for about 1 in 5 children in Africa being engaged in child labor and 9.7 in hazardous work. Now, let me give you some more information about the characteristics, let's say, of the children that are found to be in child labor. But first of all, let's pause on an analysis of trends now at the regional level. So this graph shows you the percentage of children in child labor since 2008 until 2020. And you can see we have 4 regions represented here, including Africa as a whole. In Africa, looking at 2016 and 2020, we see that there is a slight increase in the prevalence of child labor. It went from 19.6 in 2016 to 21.6 in 2020. There are 2 regions where there has been a decline, Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia and the Pacific. And we know that when there has been a decline, this is the consequence of reduction in informality, reduction in poverty, increased access to education, and increase in social protection coverage. What does it mean in terms of numbers? And here again, this is an illustration of trends, specifically in terms of number of children in child labor. And as it was mentioned earlier, in the case in Africa, overall, we're talking about an increase in 20 million. And you can see that a critical moment where this switch has occurred in terms of increasing number is around 2016, where we see that the numbers has started to soar. Now, let's go into projecting to 2025 and 2030, which are clear goals within the SDG agenda. So because the trends in the past and the progress that we've made in the past is not sufficient, this graph shows you the level of acceleration that will be necessary for the world to be able to reach elimination of child labor by 2025 and 2030. So meeting this target will require significant acceleration. Worldwide, the rate of progress has to be 18 times faster than the progress that we recorded between 2008 and 2016. So there is a long way to go to be able to meet the target. And in the absence of meeting this target, without acceleration, in Africa alone, in 2025, we expect to have over 100 million children in child labor. Now let's go into the next slide and let's look at the characteristics of these children, starting from their age. These graphs show you the prevalence of child labor across the three age groups of 5 to 11, 12 to 14, 15 to 17. And what you can see, the prevalence of child labor in this three age group is the same, is around 9.7, 9.6, 9.3. And this is worrisome because even among the youngest children, those who are only age 5 to 11, we have 1 in 10 of them who are engaged in child labor. And as you can see, you have the numbers for Africa, 54.9 million young children aged 5 to 11 are in child labor. So there is a significant proportion of children in child labor that are very, very young. Now let's look at their sex disaggregation. We know that child labor is more prevalent among boys than girls. And this is what this graph shows you, is the level of child labor for boys and girls across the different age groups. And you can see that this gap between the two sexes tend to increase with age, and it becomes particularly relevant in the 15 to 17 age group, where boys are twice in terms of prevalence of child labor compared to girls. And if we look at numbers for Africa, we have 52.1 million boys in child labor and 40.1 million girls. Now, in terms of sectorial composition of child labor, well, agriculture represents a significant proportion of child labor across all regions. Worldwide, we have 7 out of 10 children in child labor who are in the agricultural sector. And in the case of Africa, this proportion is even higher. 81% of all children in child labor are actually engaged in the agricultural sector, followed by services, including domestic work and industry. In terms of status at work, where most of child labor, children in child labor are, they are actually contributing family workers. Family work predominates across all regions, and this is normally the entry point for child labor. So if we think about a typical child who starts working and is engaged in child labor, we need to think about a child who is young, starts working with the family, most likely in the farms, in small farming. In the case of Africa, you can see the numbers here. 81.4% of all children in child labor are contributing family workers. 10.3% are workers that work on their own account, and 8.3% are employees. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a significant share of child labor takes hazardous form. So hazardous occupations, industry, work performed for very long hours. And you can see that even in the context of family work, there is a significant proportion of this child labor that is hazardous. And as you can see, this is the case across the two age group. So contrary to the perception that working within the family is safe, this data reminds us even that when working within the family unit, you have a significant proportion of child labor who is actually hazardous across both ages. Now, we talk about the association between child labor and education. And these graphs show you the proportion of children in child labor who are also out of school. Across all regions of the world, significant shares of children in child labor are out of school. And I wanted to point at the case specifically of Africa, where 20% of children in child labor are not attending school. And this includes also, again, very young children, 5 to 11, for which school is compulsory. And of course, we also have a significant proportion, the remaining proportion of children who are in child labor and are attending school, but we know how taxing this can be to have to attend school and at the same time having to respond to the responsibility that result from being engaged in child labor. I'm going to stop here and give back the floor to Mikhail, who can guide us through the policy recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. I will be very quick because I think this is the topic of the next point in the agenda. Just to say that, you know, we invest in these global estimates and with the all member states on this collection of data at national level on child labor, not only to have a picture of the situation of child labor at a given point or to measure progress, but more than anything, to be able to base policy recommendations on data and evidence. So the roadmap that accompanies this global estimate is based on the result that we just presented with Claudia. Let me just go to two of them, or three of them quite quickly. One, and we decided to put that as first one, is the importance of social protection. There is an urgent need to make social protection universal, not only for families, for adults, but also with child benefits, which have proven to be beneficial for education, for health, and to decrease child labor. So that's a priority. And you've seen in the graph on our projection on the impact of COVID that we can make a difference. If there is investment and increase on social protection, the number of children in child labor may decrease quite quickly. Definitely the importance of making sure that those children who have been excluded from school because of COVID and school closure should go back as soon as possible to school. Same for those who didn't have a chance to enter in the curriculum. And we know that it's quite difficult when children drop out to go back, and the risk of those children going to child labor track instead of being in education is high. All the recommendations are important, but it's really essential that in the coming months, as mentioned by ILO Regional Director, there is a chance to go through the data specific for Africa and to develop the roadmap specific to Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you that's a very, very big thank you to yourself, Madame de Kock and Madame Kappa, for really highlighting to us and showing us the risk of continuing on the trajectory that we are on. And I think one of the things I've lifted from there is that we need to increase our rate of progress by at least 18 times if we are going to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, if you had not noticed, we have put a link to the global estimates in the chat should you want to download that for yourself. And as per the invitation extended by Michaela as we ended, to really contextualize this roadmap in your own environment. One of the things that both Claudia and Michaela did highlight and indicate is that the next session that we're going to now be transitioning into is really going to be looking at how do we accelerate action? How do we accelerate against the progress that has already been made? And so in this session, we're looking for strategies, policies, best practices that are really going to allow us to make the desired progress at a rate of 18 times or more. I am going to ask my speakers to kindly please work with me to keep their responses and their engagements to no more than 3 minutes. We are running quite behind on time, but none of what has been delivered so far has been beyond what is necessary. Each and everything has been absolutely critical. And so I'm appealing to my speakers now to please limit your contributions to a really concise, brief, and to the point engagement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we go into this session now, I'm going to call on Mr. Omar Diop, who is, of course, Senior Advisor in the Directorate for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development of the AUC. And as he comes up, I am going to be putting a question to Mr. Diop. And the question to Mr. Diop is as follows. Social protection has come up time and again in the conversation today, including as one of the top recommendations that have come out of the global estimates. And yet we know that in Africa, we have the lowest social protection coverage in the world at 17.8% of the total population. The question to you, Mr. Diop, is what is the African Union strategy to extend social protection coverage, especially as we think about informal and rural economies where child labor is rampant? And how do we ensure that these efforts really translate to a decrease in child labor, both for girls and for boys, Mr. Diop?
Thank you, Nozifo. Good afternoon, Your Excellency, Commissioner, Social Affairs Commissioner of ECAS, the ILO Regional Director. Good afternoon to everyone. The 10-year plan of action on eradication of child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery recognize a key role to social protection and livelihood intervention to fight child labor. There are continental frameworks aiming at promoting social protection for the well-being of people in inclusive and cohesive society. Beyond the specific social protection provision of the African Charter on the right and welfare of the child, the Social Agenda 2063 seeks to protect the children and eradicate child labor on the continent by 2023. Combined with the ILO Recommendation 202, Social Protection Floor, the implementation of the AU Social Protection Plan for Informal Economy and Rural Workers with its mainstreaming strategy into the comprehensive agriculture development, can yield meaningful impact on accelerating the elimination of child labor. In view of accelerating progress against the child labor in the continent, member states should enhance their social protection policies and measures and make them more child labor eradication sensitive, scaling up investment. Social protection has a positive impact on the economic, social, and environmental drivers of the child labor through enhancing their human capabilities, resilience, and economic inclusion of the children and of their communities as well. By empowering women in the agriculture and informal economy, the scale of impact on child labor elimination can be amplified. This orientation will require research on how better social protection can contribute to child labor eradication and increase knowledge on the link between the two. Innovative approaches and systems will be needed to design targeting agriculture, education, and informal economy. The interaction, synergies, and complementarity between social protection policies and programs with policies in agriculture, education, health, informal economy should be promoted to achieve broad and significant transformative results. Child and family benefit are to be considered together. Innovative social dialogue can ease these interactions. Africa can learn from other regions in Asia and Latin America on their strategies that led to important reduction of child labor over the last decade. South-South cooperation platform is needed with the AUC facilitation supported by ILO, Unicef, and international partners. To conclude, as for the future, the first 4-year implementation program of the 10-year plan of action on child labor eradication will reserve a fair and consequent place to social protection in the agriculture sector, informal economy, education sector, refugees, and fragile states. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diop, for that contribution. It's a clarion call to increase investment to make sure that our policies are child labor sensitive, and perhaps an opportunity to learn from each other from a South-South cooperation perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, as I move now from Mr. Diop, I'm moving to invite the Secretary General of the Organization of African Trade Union Unity, Mr. Arezgi Mesmut, as he prepares himself to come on. The question that I'd like to put to you, Mr. Mesmut, is that if we look at families in Africa and families in the informal economy, we know that this is where we're more likely to see child labor. Workers are often self-employed and are most of the time vulnerable to subsistence work. The question to you is, how are workers' organizations contributing to efforts to transition from the informal economy to the formal economy in Africa? More importantly, do you expect that these coordinated efforts are going to contribute to ending child labor? If so, how? The floor is yours, Mr. Mesut.
Merci. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour ou bonsoir. C'est selon votre position géographique. Merci de m'avoir donné cette opportunité pour donner notre avis sur cette question très sensible et cruciale qui concerne cette partie de la population ou dans le monde en Afrique qui doit être naturellement à l'école mais qui se retrouve déjà à un âge précoce confronté aux difficultés de la vie malgré tous les aléas et les dangers. Vous savez que notre approche au niveau syndical elle est globale parce que le travail des enfants est la conséquence d'une situation globale liée au sous-développement. D'abord, c'est pas seulement la pauvreté. Si on dit que c'est la pauvreté, c'est une lapalissade. La pauvreté est la conséquence du sous-développement économique, social, politique, etc. Bon, je vais revenir à votre question. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire en tant que syndicaliste? Vous avez bien formulé votre question parce que d'abord, les enfants qui travaillent sont les enfants des travailleurs à faible revenu et aussi des travailleurs sans revenu. Donc, nous sommes concernés en premier lieu en tant que syndicat et la catégorie des travailleurs touchés par ce phénomène, ceux de l'informel. Et vous savez bien qu'en Afrique, il y a des chiffres effarants. En Afrique de l'Ouest, on avoisine les 90%. Donc, c'est, comme vous l'avez bien dit, c'est des métiers de subsistance. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire comme mesure d'urgence? Parce que ce que je suggère ici, par exemple, en tant que syndicaliste, c'est des mesures d'urgence. Parce que éradiquer le travail des enfants, ça sous-entend toute une politique qui peut s'étaler sur plusieurs années. Il n'y a que le développement qui peut régler ce problème pour nous. Donc pour nous, il s'agit d'abord d'organiser les travailleurs de l'informel. C'est la question principale. Il faut les organiser au sein des syndicats. Et ensuite, cet instrument permettra d'abord d'identifier, d'exprimer toutes les préoccupations et de les poser dans un cadre, dans le cadre de la négociation, du dialogue social. Donc, c'est aussi d'intervenir au niveau des gouvernements, donc de mettre en place des mécanismes, identifier des mécanismes qui peuvent limiter, donc inciter cette catégorie des travailleurs à se développer, à se convertir à une activité formelle, protégée, où la sécurité sociale, la protection sociale est assurée, mais également les aspects juridiques, parce qu'en Afrique, il y a des complicités de certaines entreprises multinationales qui font recours au travail des enfants. Je pense que nous avons un travail à faire quand il s'agit des droits fondamentaux, des droits humains. Récemment, il y a eu des plaintes qui ont été déposées contre certaines multinationales aux États-Unis. Comment ils sont complices dans l'utilisation des enfants, dans l'extraction de certains minerais. Il y a eu beaucoup d'accidents, etc. Donc, nous, on peut intervenir sur de ce côté-là, mais nous pouvons aussi intervenir pour la mise en œuvre de la recommandation de 04 de l'OIT, c'est-à-dire la transition de l'économie informelle à l'économie formelle, la ratification d'autres conventions, l'âge minimum du travail, la 138, la ratification de la convention 182 sur les pires formes du travail. Donc le syndicat pour nous, ça constitue un cadre qui peut contribuer à la mise en place de toutes ces politiques qui visent à lutter, à éradiquer le travail des enfants à court terme, à moyen terme et à long terme. Donc voilà ce que j'ai à vous dire sur cette question et merci encore une fois de m'avoir donné cette opportunité. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Mesboud. Thank you for that contribution. And again, talking about the responsibility to not only organize in the informal sector, but also to create opportunities for development and upskilling for that transition from informality to formality. Thank you very much, Mr. Mesboud. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue, I'm going to request once again that we really keep to the 3 minutes to try and get to each and every speaker within the allocated time. If I could kindly ask for your cooperation in that regard. It's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Douglas Opio, who is the Executive Director of the Federation of Uganda Employees. Welcome very much, sir. Now, before you take to the floor, let's just consider the fact that Africa really faces twin challenges. On the one hand, we know that we have the challenge of child labor. On the other hand, we also know that we are looking for work opportunities for young people. The question to you, Mr. Opio, is how do employers, organizations contribute to addressing these twin challenges in a coherent way? What are the specific needs, in addition to that, of girls and young women that must be taken into consideration from a gendered perspective? Mr. Opio, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, moderator. And thank you to the tripartite, the African Union, ILO, and Unicef. Most grateful to have this opportunity to speak on behalf of the employers. Now, I will first of all congratulate the Federation of Kenya Employers for their effort that has led to them winning the award, the Changemaker Award. Now, straight specifically to my points. First of all, the employers organization need to work on addressing the issue of the business environment. Our advocacy effort towards creating a good business environment is fundamental. I see a lot of emphasis on issues of social protection, but the best form of social protection is a job. So it's important that our efforts towards creating decent employment opportunity is even made a lot stronger during this period. And secondly, in line with also the agenda of the African Union targeting elimination of child labor within the next 10 years, we need to address the element of the transition from school to work. And that's the issue of education and skilling for the young people. For a long time, we have been speaking about skills gap, the issue of mismatch, difficulty in young people transiting from school to work. So as employers organization, we can mobilize the employers who are already within our membership to support that, to support quality apprenticeship, to support better training, but also to finance especially the lower levels of education, because the government alone will not provide the required resources. My third point is looking at generating specific evidence. Very happy with the results released by Unicef and ILO, but I think we can contribute to creating specific case studies, especially case studies that are gender sensitive, addressing the unique needs of girls and women within our own countries of operation, so that we can together make our world a better place for all children and keep them where they belong, which is in the schools, and then allow them to acquire the right skills. Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you for the opportunity. I know we are short on time, so I'll keep it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Opio, I've appreciated very much your concise and brief nature in landing some very clear recommendations, and perhaps to lift something that I'm sure we should all be tweeting about. Hashtag it's End Child Labor 2021. The best form of social protection is, and I'd add there, a decent job. Thank you very much, Mr. Opio, for raising us those points. Of course, the transition from work, from school to work rather, and of course, let's look at evidence. Let's look at empirical evidence that helps us make better decisions, and maybe case studies was one of the ways in which we can do that. With that, I'm going to move on swiftly to Dr. Chimimamba David Phiri, who is joining us in his capacity as FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for Eastern Africa and representative to the African Union. Dr. Phiri, it's lovely to be on a virtual stage with you once again, but I do want you to perhaps speak to the question of agriculture. 4 children in child labor out of every 5 work in agriculture. And so it's quite clear that for us to achieve target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, we need a breakthrough in agriculture. Could you share with us, Dr. Phiri, some good practices that we should be leaning into to end child labor in agriculture? And in your view, what is the role of agricultural stakeholders? I'm going to open the floor to you now, sir, for the next 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nosipo. I think you can hear me well. Many thanks for the question. Good afternoon, everybody. And the latest estimates that you have just mentioned are indeed a concern for FAO, since agriculture remains the main employer of children, and most of child labor occurs within the family. So the battle of eliminating child labor must be won in the agricultural sector, and I think this should be stressed. Let me start by saying that FAO is fully committed to target 8.7 and has made a commitment to that effect. And yet, despite the importance of agricultural stakeholders to making a difference, these are often not part of decision-making when it comes to strategies, policies, and legislation for addressing child labor in agriculture. We need to associate them if we want to make progress in this area. So any multi-stakeholder team that my friend Edai proposed, and that was endorsed by Commissioner El Fadil, will have to include agricultural stakeholders. It's very important. Having said that, there are some good practices that we should further promote and expand. First, social protection, such as child grants or social security for farmers, and financial instruments such as crop or livestock insurance are important. We can also improve sustainable farming practices. For instance, FAO is collaborating with ILO on the Clear Cotton project in Burkina Faso and Mali. The project is supporting the livelihoods of 1,000 vulnerable cocoa households through income generating activities to reduce their dependency on child labor. We can also empower farmers through innovation, such as mechanization and the introduction of digital tools. Above all, we need to transform our current agri-food systems to make them more sustainable and resilient. Mitigating the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on food security and nutrition is a priority for FAO. Within this context, safeguarding children's food security and ensuring nutritious and healthy diets for them is of utmost importance. This will contribute, of course, to elimination of child labor and ensuring dignified livelihoods for all. Let me finish by saying that we will not achieve zero hunger if we do not eliminate child labor. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phiri. We will not achieve zero hunger if we do not eradicate and completely eliminate child labor. And again, the multi-stakeholder group continues to grow, and the agricultural stakeholders have claimed their space in it as well through Dr. Phiri's contribution. Thank you very much for that, sir. But as you're lifting up the reality of farmers as also one of the ways that we need to look at the root causes that lead to child labor, which is a very useful set of insights as well, Dr. Phiri. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to hear from the Directorate for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Development. That's Mr. Mukulai Kennedy Ayerson, who's the policy officer in the directorate. Now, as Mr. Ayerson joins us, the question that I'd like to bring to Mr. Ayerson is, if we consider the African Union 10-year action plan that we've been making reference to today, we also know that it specifically calls for the integration of child labor issues into the implementation processes of the comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. The question to you, sir, is please simplify this for us. What does this mean exactly, and how will it accelerate progress against child labor in agriculture? Mr. Ayerson, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well aware that African agriculture provides around 60% of all employment opportunities in Africa, and it constitutes the backbone of most African economies. Therefore, it is prudent to say that agriculture itself is the biggest contributor to child labor as far as the presentation that has just been done is concerned. And you can see that child labor accounts for at least 80% of the total labor force in the agriculture sector. As such, recalling that elimination of child labor in the agriculture sector is quite a major challenge, as the agriculture sector is under-regulated in most cases, and therefore makes regulation of this sector very, very, very stringent as far as other sectors are concerned. Because the agriculture sector, in most cases, employs the children, is the family farms, which really contributes so much to child labor. Therefore, in the implementation of the 10-year action plan to eradicate child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery, calls for us to integrate it into the CADA program. And the CADA program, in doing so, the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, and Sustainable Environment is trying to strengthen the member states' capacities in order for them to mainstream child labor in all its programs. And this is going to be done through the development of the national investment plans and special programs that will focus on ending hunger by 2024, as far as the Malabo commitment are concerned. Recently, I want to say that the department has also pledged a fully division that will tackle issues to do with the rural development. And in this case, it is looking at empowering smallholders farmers, as well as access to decent rural employment. It's also trying to tackle the issue of child labor in local and regional value chains, as well as integrating child labor in issues of large programming as far as the agriculture sector is concerned. Thank you so much.
Mr. Ayerson, just shy of 3 minutes. Thank you very much, sir, for your contribution. And again, huge inspiration is drawn from what you've shared with us as we listen into the efforts to increase capacity, to mainstream child labor issues, to make sure that rural development is not left behind and on the periphery. And so all of these really pointing to an increase in progress and accelerating our capacity to take on this challenge head on. Ladies and gentlemen, from Mr. Ayerson now, I'm going to open the floor to Mr. Mahama Odrago, who is the Director for Education, Science, Technology and Innovation at the African Union. Mr. Odrago, thank you very much for being here with us. Now, I think you will have heard Her Excellency Amira El-Fadil speaking about her concerns around the impact of COVID-19 on education, speaking about the dropout rates. And so as I come to you, might you please share with us what is the African Union strategy to improve enrollment and quality education, to reduce dropout rates, and to provide for out-of-school children, including those that are in child labor? This, of course, as we all journey towards universal education for both genders. Mr. Odrago, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to really express my gratitude to our sister department and ILO and Unicef for really inviting us to be a part of this event. And indeed, the issue of child labor is a very keen challenge to Africa. To ensure that we really make progress in our fight against child labor in all its form, whether it is forced child labor, human trafficking, modern slavery, we need to really accelerate investment in children education. It has been said over and over by the different interventions. You know, both the first and second decade of education put emphasis on children education. The Continental Education for Africa, CESA, further emphasized this thematic by ensuring that we put in place a cluster on early childhood education and development, to which really outline the critical path to increasing in a coherent and coordinating manner countries and their local and international partners' investment in children education. This is really from the start. Relevant clusters also are also operational in terms of teacher development. We need to have very well-dedicated teachers who are also earning a very good livelihood so that we can really get quality education. We also have schools feeding program. It's very important to be able to retain children in school, because without with school feeding, it really improves the retention of children in school. We also have clusters that are dealing basically on primary and secondary education. All that has what you said is to really ensure that together we work on implementing these different policies to assist member states in really ensuring that children remain at school and then they have a very successful rate. When we look at the data, well, it's okay, but we can do a lot more. And like what you mentioned, with the advent of COVID-19 pandemic, some of the mitigation measures that and strategy that are implemented by at national level had further exacerbated the education crisis Africa is facing generally. And I wouldn't add to some of the civil unrest we are having in the different continents that are making really the issue very complicated. But the Minister of Education, Science, Technology and Innovation have really agreed on clear guidelines to ensure that they will open schools and ensure that some level of security is attained so that children can be at school safely despite the pandemic. And we have been working with them. We have put a platform online to really see, for members to learn from each other how they are reopening and how they are really moving to ensure that they are getting quality education to the children. Last, I want to mention one of the committee of 10 of states heard the Committee of Head of State and Government championing education, science and technology and innovation, who have also adopted an action plan really to create awareness among their peers through action and mobilization of resources and advocating for more investment in the critical area of education to benefit children and keep them clear from early marriage and labor and all these crises that Africa is facing. And to just take 20 seconds to conclude, I want to really state emphatically that we have all the tools at our disposal in terms of strategy, whether it is CESA, whether it is the TVET strategy, whether it is STISA 2024, which really look onto technology and how you move from there to innovation. And of course, the overarching Agenda 2063. So these policies to counter these causes facing African children exist already. Some of them may require some adjustment, of course. They are not cast in stone, but let's move into action oriented and implementation of this framework. We will not achieve it by really remaining in the policy and rhetoric bubble. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We need to break out of the policy and rhetoric bubble, and we need to move into action. And of course, Mr. Ouedraogo, you have lifted the complexity and the multifaceted nature of the education challenge and really speaking to how we really need to be coming at it in our different roles as different stakeholders with our different strengths if we're going to make sure that we're not only hitting universal access, but we're also ensuring the retention of learners within the school. Let's make education part of the solution as we recover from the pandemic and not the thing that gets left behind. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Drago. Again, I appeal for 3 minutes, please, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward. It is my pleasure now to share the floor with Mr. Mesfin Yilmaz, who is the Labor Inspection and OSH Director in the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs in Ethiopia. Mr. Yilmaz, as you take the floor now, the question to you is that if we look at the data, we know that almost a third of children in Africa aged between the ages of 5 and 14 are in child labor and they're not attending school. The others are combining school as well as work. And so it's very, very clear to all of us that in order to end child labor, governments must prioritize universal access to public education. The question to you, sir, is what is the government of Ethiopia doing to tackle the challenge of child labor through education? Can you share with us some of the results that you've achieved, in particular as you look at enrollment of both boys and girls? Mr. Yilmaz, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Mesfin Yilmaz from Ethiopia. Good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning. After having said this, I just want to suggest that my intention that the previous speakers has given us an important issue to address child labor globally and the situation to improve the situation in this regard. Ethiopia as a country have developed an aggressive poverty reduction program for the next 10 years that essentially integrates decent work and inclusive growth, social protection, and in particular, addressing the worst forms of child labor in Ethiopia. This important 10-year plan had addressed that the 5-year national action plan on the worst forms of child labor we have just launched with a national multi-stakeholder consultation forum just last week with the objective of ending the worst forms of child labor in 2025, the worst forms of child labor. Of course, it is very ambitious one, but we will stretch as we can, having 3 strategic pillars. One is the prevention aspect, the second, the protection, and the third, rehabilitation and integration aspects and strategies. With this, the strategic pillars giving priority, among others, is the better access to education for child laborers in this country. We do have a free public education, especially the primary level, for all children. We will strengthen this service, especially by incorporating the compulsory aspect as UNESCO already promoting it. We need to do this and achieve this gap. The second important thing that we have to do is we review the policy and laws of the country to better address child laborers and especially the worst forms of child labor. Having recognized that the prevalence of this problem in Ethiopia is increasing from time to time, the awareness and advocacy programs should be aggressive enough to reach to all rural areas with different languages and communities through medias and other instruments, especially addressing the family level conversations. The other important area that I want to highlight is that supporting families to sustain their livelihood. Child laborers have got their poor economic setup with regard to their families and households. The income generating activities we really promote from multilateral and bilateral organizations here in Ethiopia, the local and domestic NGOs working on this area to support activities within this issue. Therefore, working closely with the Minister of Education to improve quality of education by developing curriculums, especially for those child laborers who really drop out or coming into the school environment to address their lively issues. Building capacities of the federal and regional labor inspection and advisory services is also important in this aspect to strengthen this service in cooperation with employers, workers, and religious and civic society organizations. Of course, we do have a problem related to COVID as a country, but having also this, we will strive to whatever level to address COVID, not to affect more child laborers in this regard, working with the Ministry of Health. The Decent Work Country program at the national level is, I think it is on last month that we have already launched the 5-year Decent Work Country program by the ILO, and we will also use this opportunity to scale up our responses. Finally, let us share the common vision of ending child labor to all African countries, and let us act now together to end child labor. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yilma. Prevention, rehabilitation, and reintegration. None of these things, none of these pillars are possible if we don't tackle child labor head on. And of course, if we don't look at our education systems and make sure that when we're looking at access and those enrollment rates, that we are hitting the maximum possible numbers in our respective communities and societies. Thank you very much, Mr. Yilma. I move now to Mr. Ogola, Mr. Charles Ogola, who is the statistician at the Intergovernmental Authority on Development Secretariat. Now, there is somebody else that is unmuted. Thank you very much for muting yourself. I do appreciate it. Mr. Ogola, thank you very much for being with us. I do want just to pause and consider what the 2020 global estimates are telling us. They're telling us that where there is fragility, there is 3 times higher on average rate of child labor in those fragile states and fragile countries. In addition to this, refugees and internally displaced people are particularly vulnerable to child labor. The question I'd like to bring to you, sir, is what is IGAD doing and its members to protect refugee children from child labor? And might you also comment whether there are any special perspectives on girl refugees that are at risk of child labor? Mr. Ogola, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, Africa Union, Unicef, and also ILO for providing this platform for us to be able to also share some of the experience. And more so, when we're looking at this, IGAD Secretariat is really working closely with the member states in refugee management aspects through some of the key projects, for example, the IGAD TB Malaria Control Initiative in a cross-border and setup for cross-border setups and refugee camps. Also looking at the COVID response, IGAD COVID response project, which also is looking at the issues of the socio-economic aspect and also and health in the refugee setup. Not forgetting that IGAD is working closely also with ILO in terms of coming up with also the IGAD free movement protocols of persons and and this one majorly looks at improving the opportunities for regular labor mobility, including improving the economic situation and also the labor aspect for the refugees. IGAD has been also able to, through the Nairobi process and also coming up with the Djibouti Declaration, which is an initiative on refugee education, which provides a framework for the refugee, for quality education for the refugees, therefore they can also be matched. Having said this, it is also critical to note that at IGAD, working closely with ILO, we have been able also to look at the policies that can really, and guidelines that can really provide conducive environment for these refugees also to be able also to be engaged here. And with this, I just want to mention a bit good practice, and also from one of our member states in terms of the refugee management, which provides the rights to the refugees, such as the rights to education, work, private or land, and also access to healthcare and other basic services. And with this, as we look at IGAD region, the refugees comprises of 4.7 million, and Uganda constituting of 1.48. Practices that we are talking about here that has really helped also in terms of protecting the child labor is in terms of, first of all, assessment for the needs and the concern coming up from particular communities about a particular child protection, concerns such as child labor. And this has been majorly in terms of the refugee settlements across the Uganda, and then establishing the steering committees formed purposely to address the concerns, that thereby discussing and planning for how to move forward in addressing this situation. In addition, engaging of the key stakeholders at all levels in terms of the community leaders, refugee welfare committees, child protection committees, and fostering and also fostering the engagement with all the stakeholders. Having said this, because of time, I can just go ahead and say in terms of the sensitization, the key areas that we look into is the awareness with the parents, and creating awareness with the parents and child about the law on child labor and the penalties, encouraging parents to take responsibility of their children and report all cases of the disabled to find out their causes and of child labor in community, and allow them with some of us in management of all these child protection issues. I just want to, as I finish, I just want to say that these good practices have been is a very good model, and various agencies are being incorporated. For example, Allied, World Vision, Save the Children, WILO, ADRA, Finland, UNHCR, and under the auspices and also under the leadership of the Prime Minister of Uganda, who are providing exemplary much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ogol. And again, you know, really lifting what is possible through meaningful partnerships, but also uplifting some best practices around refugee management with the perspective of really empowering refugees to know their rights as well. And you're saying, you know, engaging at both the child and a parent level. Ladies and gentlemen, we get to our final speaker in the session. And so certainly not least in the lineup, it is my absolute honor to welcome Her Excellency Kapinga Yvette Ngandu, who is the Commissioner for Human Development and Social Affairs, this at the Economic Community of Central African States, or ECAS. Share her words and on this moment where we are pausing to acknowledge World Day Against Child Labor in Africa. Excellency, for your intervention, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. You will allow me to speak in French, even though I speak fluently in English, but for purpose of time, it's easier that I speak in my language of choice. Permettez-moi de remercier tous les organisateurs de la réunion, particulièrement la commissaire en charge des affaires sociales de l'Union africaine qui a eu la brillante idée de convier la réunion de ce jour. J'aimerais souligner en ce qui concerne la région de l'Afrique centrale, les États de l'Afrique centrale qui sont au nombre de 11 États, de souligner que la problématique de ce jour Le travail des enfants en Afrique centrale concerne tous les États de la sous-région, mais 3 États particulièrement sont affectés, les plus affectés. On les compte parmi les 10 États les plus affectés dans le monde. Il s'agit du Cameroun, de la RDC et de la RCA. C'est un phénomène qui est, comme je l'ai dit un peu plus tôt, également présent dans les 7 autres États membres de la sous-région. Les formes d'exploitation varient, allant de la prostitution, le recrutement forcé des enfants dans les conflits armés, le recrutement des enfants dans le trafic de stupéfiants et autres activités illicites, et toute autre forme de travaux susceptibles de nuire à la santé, à la sécurité ou à la moralité des filles et des garçons de moins de 18 ans. Mais le travail forcé dans les mines industrielles et artisanales est un fléau qui nous préoccupe au plus haut niveau. Les formes d'exploitation dans l'est de la RDC, République démocratique du Congo spécifiquement, concernent des milliers d'enfants qui sont encore contraints de travailler dans les mines au profit inhumain des mines industrielles qui approvisionnent les chaînes mondiales. L'Unicef a estimé quant à elle qu'environ 40 000 garçons et filles travaillent dans toutes les mines du sud de la RDC. Beaucoup d'entre elles sont impliquées dans l'exploitation minière du cobalt. Ces enfants sont en général âgés de 3 à 17 ans et ça donne à des tâches telles que le lavage des minerais, le creusage dans les remblais, le ramassage, le triage et le transport des kilos de minerais. Cette exploitation qui les contraint à descendre dans des galeries sans protection aucune les expose chaque fois et à chaque instant à un danger permanent et à des maladies respiratoires pour la plupart du temps incurables. En guise de recommandation, pour ce cas spécifiquement de la RDC, il convient d'encourager le gouvernement de la RDC à adopter formellement un plan d'action national qui, du reste, a déjà été élaboré depuis 2011. Le gouvernement de la RDC a annoncé que le pays s'engageait à éliminer le travail des enfants dans le secteur minier d'ici à 2025. Nous devons les y aider, particulièrement à réglementer davantage d'exploitation minière artisanale et enfin assurer le respect des droits de l'homme dans les mines. En République centrafricaine, qui est le 2e pays qui nous préoccupe également, le scénario reste le même. Le travail des enfants dans les mines de diamants a augmenté de 50% dans les mois qui ont suivi la fermeture des écoles en mars 2020 due à la Covid-19. Dans ce pays, qui est ravagé par la guerre, il y avait déjà un taux de travail des enfants les plus élevés au monde. Les lois minières du pays, la RCA, interdisent le travail des enfants qui est passible d'une amende et d'une condamnation allant jusqu'à 3 ans de prison, mais l'application de la loi est faible. Et les autorités disent qu'elles ont un contrôle minimal sur ce qui se passe dans les mines à cause de la guerre. Il faut donc avoir des données plus fiables concernant ce cas-là et d'autres sur le nombre d'enfants travaillant dans les mines, dont beaucoup sont détenus par des groupes armés qui contrôlent encore une très large partie du pays. Il convient de sensibiliser les communautés et les autorités locales quant à ce. Permettez-moi de souligner aussi le cas du Cameroun, qui est aussi l'un des pays les plus affectés par ce fléau. L'Est du pays compte d'un nombre assez élevé d'enfants travaillant aussi dans les mines et qui sont privés d'école. Ils travaillent dans des exploitations artisanales pour la plupart du temps, mettant en péril leur santé pour des salaires de misère. La plupart de ces jeunes orpailleurs, pour la plupart, ne sont jamais allés à l'école de leur vie, ce qui perpétue le cycle de pauvreté à long terme. Ils sont aussi soumis à des tentatives d'enrôlement dans des groupes armés au nord du pays, au Cameroun, à l'instar d'autres pays de la sous-région, et sont exposés à des exploitations indescriptibles et d'extrême violence. Quel que soit le pays dont nous parlons, ce phénomène appelle à agir conformément à l'engagement pris par nos chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Et la résolution des Nations Unies qui fait de 2021 l'année internationale de l'abolition du travail des enfants. Cet appel à l'action est soutenu par la CEAC, l'organisation que je représente, en vue de la mise en place de mécanismes de surveillance et d'alerte. Permettez-moi de conclure mon intervention par ces quelques propositions concrètes, qui sont au nombre de 7. Pour notre part, il convient de procéder à la création dans chaque État membre d'une juridiction spécialisée contre le travail des enfants, le travail forcé et la traite des êtres humains, et ainsi pourvoir des données plus fiables sur le nombre des enfants travaillant dans les mines. Il faut renforcer les mécanismes de protection sociale, comme il l'a été dit tantôt, et développer des politiques régionales et nationales sur l'emploi décent. Il convient également de sensibiliser les communautés et les autorités locales là où il n'existe pas encore de structure viable, et même les parents, comme il a été dit par mon confrère de l'IGAD, encore réticents de voir leurs enfants renouer avec le chemin de l'école au profit d'activités minières. et lutter contre la pauvreté extrême des familles d'où sont issues ces familles qui restent la cause profonde et principale du recrutement des enfants dans les travaux forcés. Je souhaite également faire écho à la proposition de la commissaire El Fadil concernant le rôle des arts et de la culture pour la réinsertion des enfants exploités. C'est un point qui est majeur à souligner et qui contribuera à pérenniser nos actions. La dénonciation des pratiques non concurrentielles et déloyales des chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales qui exploitent les enfants doit aussi faire partie de nos actions à prendre à bras le corps. L'adoption d'un mécanisme régional de coordination et de coopération pour l'éradication du travail des enfants, en impliquant tous les acteurs de différents secteurs étatiques et non étatiques, ainsi que la société civile doit aussi faire partie de nos préoccupations. Je crois que ça a été déjà dit tantôt. Enfin, permettez-moi de conclure en soulignant que l'instauration d'un dialogue à tous les niveaux pour dénoncer les abus liés au travail des enfants devrait également faire partie de nos stratégies. Permettez-moi de conclure maintenant, nous pourrions aller beaucoup plus loin dans les débats, mais je crois que ça peut constituer déjà une première réflexion. Je vous remercie, Madame la modératrice.
Merci beaucoup, Your Excellency. Of course, thank you very much for really closing us off with your voice as you lean into the conversation. And it's so important that you've started off with the importance of just really investing in reliable data on the African continent. If we do not have reliable data, we're not making informed decisions. And of course, lots of recommendations in terms of focus areas, lifting, of course, instability and conflict, and of course, lifting the example of what happens in mining communities. All of these are very, very important considerations as we look to pave the way forward. A very, very big thank you to you, Your Excellency Ngandu, on that contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now just to share with you, if you are not aware of it, that just last week, Alliance 8.7 launched the SDG 8.7 Innovation Challenge. Now, this is a call for innovative solutions, for out-of-the-box thinking, to really call on the opportunity to address the challenges that Pathfinder countries as well as non-Pathfinder countries are facing as they try to really achieve this target 8.7 of our Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this innovation challenge has two categories, a global category and a regional category. The global category is going to be looking for innovators to respond to the call for digital information systems, for collaborative work to end child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking. That's the global category. The regional category is an invitation to all innovative, out-of-the-box thinkers on the continent to think about preventing forced labor through skills and lifelong learning in Africa, and to really bring in their ideas in terms of these two categories, and send them into the SDG 8.7 Innovation Challenge. If you want to find out more about this challenge, all you need to do is go to the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor website. The website is endchildlabor2021.org. You can see it on your screen at the bottom of the page. That is where you can send your entries. The closing date, ladies and gentlemen, very, very important, 15th of August 2021. So make sure that you do not miss that closing date. And of course, we do encourage you to take a screenshot, share this with your networks. Most importantly, as an African myself, I can say this, I know that our continent is absolutely brimming with young, talented, innovators. And so we have, I think, a massive chance of winning both the global and the regional categories. So please make sure that we are able to take the competition to the world by participating and sharing this within your networks. As we prepare to close, allow us to close on a very, very high note. Now, in addition to this being a very important year in the fight against child labor in Africa, we also know that for the African Union, it is the year of art, culture, and heritage. And if we pause and we think about Agenda 2063 and we look at Aspiration 5, Aspirations 5 talks about an Africa with a strong cultural identity with common heritage and shared values and ethics. This aspiration is strongly aligned to the conversation we're having here today, which is really about an Africa that is free of child labor, an Africa where children are able to fill their homes with laughter, are able to be in classrooms, are able to be learning, and of course are enabled to engage in their childhood. And so as we close off this event, let's close it off on a celebratory note. Let's close it off in true African style with a little bit of music and a little bit of emotion. Now, what was happened in this year, in the year of the elimination of child labor, is that the ILO and JM International collaborated together for the very first time to really produce music against child labor in the form of a music competition. And for this competition, more than 200 entries were received from artists coming from more than 50 countries around the world. And so at this moment, it's with such pride and such pleasure that we are going to be sharing the winners of both categories of this global music competition, and that they're both from Africa. Right, so we're going to hear from Bernice Pitrioka from Burkina Faso. We're going to hear from SCAZ student band from Zimbabwe, who went on to win this global music competition. Both of them, of course, African. But more importantly, as we enjoy their musical pieces, let's also lean in to DRC-born, world-renowned singer and songwriter Lukuwa Kanza, who was a member of the celebrity jury of this competition. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy this short musical piece that we are now bringing to you, after which we will then officially close off our proceedings. To the technical team, let's bring on the music.
Bonjour, je suis Bernice Pitropa, je viens du Burkina Faso. Je suis ravie de participer à ce projet contre le travail des enfants. Je remercie JM International, l'Organisation internationale du travail, les musiciens et le projet Clear Coton. Donnez-moi ma place, je ne veux pas grandir avant l'âge. Donnez-moi ma place, je ne veux pas grandir avant l'âge. Tous les jours je suis au champ, sous le soleil, comme les autres de 8 ans, mais je vis pas pareil. Le coton m'éblouit, la verdure est pleine de soucis. Je suis un enfant, j'ai plein de rêves. Je veux être comme le président, l'école fera de moi le prochain. Je veux tout apprendre du monde et venir en aide à mes prochains. Papa, donne-moi la chance, je serai ta meilleure semence. Maman, tu pries pour moi, que s'éloigne de moi la malchance. Pas qu'aussi, aïe, baba, pas qu'aussi. Pas qu'aussi, aïe, même pas qu'aussi. Mamie, faut biga, faut ya mambaba, faut son manjes, mamie, ma place est à l'école et pas dans les champs, non, 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 non. Ma place est à l'école et pas dans les champs, non, 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 non. Je veux aussi danser, je veux aussi m'amuser, je veux aussi danser, je veux aussi m'amuser. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to present to you the Music Crossroads Academy Zimbabwe student band. We're going to perform a song entitled Vana Ava, and this song is addressing issues pertaining to child labor. We're saying no to child labor. Special thanks to JM International, International Labor Organization, International Federation of Musicians, and the Clear Cotton Project. Enjoy.
Anashishikana pamoyo, haana kana mufaro, anasurukiwa nekushaya tariro. Chero musuwo wechikora hauzivi, anomanikidzwa kushanda mabasa akaomarara, asina nezera rake.
Anashishikana pamoyo, hana mfaro. Chero pamsuwo wechikoro, hapana wanoziva. Anomanikidzwa kushanda, kuita maricho, kuchera mugodi, anopiwa mosha, anoshanda. Zvakaomarara, zvakaomarara, avatarisa iye. Nezera rake roro. Banava, Banava, isava jinirire. Banava, vatungamirire mangwana. Banava, isava jinirire. Banava, vatungamirire mangwana.
Félicitations Bernice du Burkina Faso et MKAS du Zimbabwe. Merci pour ce combat, pour la lutte contre le travail des enfants. Grâce à vous, ce message va aller beaucoup plus loin. Parce qu'avec la musique, ça peut changer la vie des gens. Ça peut donner aux enfants la force d'aller beaucoup plus loin. Merci beaucoup. À très bientôt.
It is a massive thank you. There's a massive thank you to JM International and the ILO for that collaboration that really saw Bernice and MCA's student band from Zimbabwe really taking the competition to the world and bringing the honors home. I certainly think that we can repeat that even with the Target 8.7 Innovation Challenge. Massive congratulations to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our proceedings. I'd like to first just thank profusely our audience who have really journeyed with us in the conversation today. We did see your high interaction with your comments and your questions. These are going to be taken into consideration as we lift the 2020 global estimates and seek to translate them in our various countries, in our various regions. Thank you very much for your attendance today. It is an invitation to continue the conversation. The hashtag is EndChildLabor2021. Let's take this into social media. Remember to tag me at The Real Nosy, tag the ILO, tag Unicef, tag African Union, and we will be taking the conversation forward. A big thank you to all our speakers today who have really lent their voices to a really important moment in history. We will be held accountable to whether we've kept or broken our promises. We know that those milestones, those moments of truth will be 2025, 2030, 2040, and 2063. A massive thank you to the teams from the African Union, UNICEF, and ILO who have made today possible, who have made this courageous conversation possible for the continent's children. From myself, Nozipho Mbandwa, here in South Africa, thank you very much for making the time to join us. It's goodbye for now.